So today we're going to talk about an event that occurs before World War II that I personally believe kind of doesn't get talked about enough. Um, when we think about World War II, we talk so much about the Holocaust and we focus on the atrocities that Germany put on, right? The genocide that they orchestrated. We never talk about the horrendous actions from other actors. Now, during World War II, we're going to talk about Italy, Germany, and Japan all being a part of these Axis powers. Now, we're going to focus on Japan for this one because we need to talk about what Japan was doing before World War II even starts to get a frame of reference on who these people are, who's in power, and what they're doing. So we're going to figure out what is it that happened in the city of Nanking in 1937. Again, before the war starts, what is happening? What is the Japanese government orchestrating? So Japan, for the longest time, they had benefited from World War I. There's the interwar years where we're going to see the government become more militaristic. They're going to develop and kind of bolster and modernize in a way. They're going to move away from their isolationism of the past centuries, and they're going to become much more militaristic and expansionist in their policy. They're going to start looking for other places, right? With imperialism, with all of that, Japan is looking to take control of other areas. You're going to have Emperor Hirohito coming to power, who is incredibly aggressive. And one of the problems with Japan is it's a very small, or it's a smaller territory. It's kind of broken up, and they don't typically have a lot of resources, or at least not what we would consider kind of essential wartime or economically beneficial resources. They don't have a lot of oil. They don't have a lot of steel reserves. They don't have any of those kind of things. So they have to go elsewhere. Well, when the economy starts to fail, when the economy starts to turn over, they're basically left without somebody to trade with. And if you're trying to militarize, if you're trying to build up your economy and everybody's economy is failing, you're going to have to look for other realms, right? Other ways to build up your economy. What Japan decided to do is, because they were more aggressive and more modernized, they had decided to expand into China. Right, they're going to take over Manchuria for the iron and coal resources that are there. That is this, if you look at the map, that's the territory in the top there. They're then going to continue that expansion into the late 30s, taking over more and more Chinese territory. Now, there's this challenge against the League of Nations and what they're saying, because they're essentially not necessarily declaring war. They're just stealing territory from this kind of weaker nation. And every time they expand, they end up finding an excuse to continue to expand. So when they took Manchuria, there's this talk about a border dispute or a couple of Japanese soldiers being that get like attacked from the dark or from the bushes, and they claim that the Chinese are sneaking in and trying to kill off people along the borders. So that gives them an excuse to continue their expansion. They continue and continue and continue to take more to punish the Chinese. Well, a lot of, or some resources say that there really was no attack, or it might have been, some random shooting. Is the killing of one or two people substantiation for the continued domination and expansion into somebody else's country? I don't know, right? Now, one of the things is Japan and their expansion is incredibly aggressive. It's not just a military expansion. What they're doing to the people in China is horrific. They talk about how when they're pushing forward, they're trying to take over the capital of Nanking, and they're killing anybody that comes in their way. That's soldiers, that's civilians. There's talks of them clearing entire towns and leaving nothing but dead bodies and skulls, right? The Japanese are not, I should put it like this. In the same way that the Nazis have this ideology of superiority of the Aryan race, the Japanese also have this superiority of Japanese people. There's this racial aspect to it that the Chinese are inferior. They would describe them as swine or pigs ready to be slaughtered. Right? That kind of terminology is what we refer to as genocidal language. Essentially, when you dehumanize people, when you take away their humanity, you make them easier to exterminate or to get rid of. So if they have soldiers that are walking through thinking these people are nothing but cattle ready to be slaughtered, is it really morally wrong for them to kill them? At least that's the mentality. Now, there's going to be this continued fight. There's a communist uprising that's going to occur in China, and there's a lot of this fighting that's going to go on from within. So China itself was not in a great place to defend itself. It's dealing with the civil war that's going on there and invaders coming from Japan. Now, this is all going to culminate with the attack of Nanking or Nanjing, okay, the capital of China. Now, we refer to this, or there's been a number of ways that we refer to this. There's the invasion of Nanking, the Nanking massacre, the Nanking killings, and then the rape of Nanking. Typically, when I refer to it, it's the rape of Nanking, aptly named because the soldiers were not just attacking this city to capture it. The soldiers were going in, taking everything they could, burning down the buildings, taking captives of all the civilians, right? And these are not typically in war. If you capture a civilian, that is a kind of a POW. You keep them, you make sure they're safe. You don't attack them because they're what's called a non-combative unit. They are not somebody that's going to take up arms against you. But with this different mentality, with this racial superiority that's coming about, and that's kind of pronounced in the Japanese mentality, they take advantage of these people. And I don't mean like take their stuff and leave. There's stories of them raping all the women, pulling them out, and doing all these atrocious acts to them, killing infants, tearing them away from their mothers and killing them in front of them, gutting husbands in front of their wives. Just these horrific events, and some of the women get to live after they've been viciously sexually abused, and a lot of them are killed in front of others to kind of make a point. So there's pictures that they've taken of these big trenches full of dead bodies, people getting publicly executed by being beheaded or having a firing squad take these people out. There's they would take all of the gold and anything that was worth anything off of these bodies, because once you shoot them, they're not worth anything. So you might as well take the good stuff so you can sell it or give it away and repurpose it for the military. You have children that are left in these buildings, right? They kill off the parents and then they go on. So these kids would die of starvation in the rooms or in the houses because they've been left alive. Horrific things. You have children that there's stories of children that are hiding under beds or hiding in a different room that get to watch their parents die or watch their mothers be attacked in front of them, and that's it, right? They're just left to fend for themselves, and they have to go find some random person to take care of them, all because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? We've dug up big graveyards essentially of skulls and bones of the people that have been killed in Nanking. And now the real question with this, and the real reason why this is so shocking a topic, is not purely because it happened. It is horrific that it happened. It is akin to a ethnic cleansing or a genocide organized by the military. The reason why this is shocking is because the Japanese government had covered these in more recent times. So right after the war happens, nobody is talking about it. Then the proof is coming out, and there's this kind of change in the government where they're talking about the atrocities that the Japanese government has put on. Now, that's all well and good, but after enough time, this nationalistic pride came about, and they wanted to stop teaching Japanese people about the horrific acts of the Japanese, right? Again, kind of harboring back to the Japanese superiority idea. Well, if they're showing that favoritism, if they're trying to make the Japanese look as good as possible, it's going to be incredibly difficult when you're teaching about them raping and killing 10,000 plus people, okay, 10,000 plus innocent people. So the agencies of education started to curtail the way that Japanese textbooks were written. It started to soften the language about it. Oh, it was an attack on combative units. They were strongholds in the capital city. That's not the truth. And after a long enough time and enough editions came out, the Japanese textbooks started to completely skim over these events and say, hey, we were spotless beforehand. All right, here's a short resource that I have for the Japanese textbook. This is talking about the rape of Nanking. So if we compare this and we talk about this, so in August 1937, 2 Japanese soldiers were shot to death in Shanghai, the capital city. After this incident, hostilities between Japan and China escalated. Japanese military officials, Chiang Kai-shek, would surrender if they captured Nanking, the capital. Japanese forces took the city in December, but he had decided to move his capital to a different place, and the conflict continued. As a side note underneath this, it says that, some soldiers and civilians were killed or wounded. This is known as the Nanking incident. Historical evidence raises doubts about the actual number of victims. No clear evidence has been found about showing the Japanese military or police officials took Chinese women by force or raped them. It's literally... this is from the 2005 version. Okay, this is not 8,000 years ago. Okay, this is 15 at this point. Okay, it's 15 years ago where the Japanese textbook was doubting the legitimacy of survivors that talked about the rape and killing of civilians in Nanking. So it's this softening language, right? They use the terminology incident, right, to make it sound smaller. They talk about how, it was, if you look at the way that they frame it too, they say that it was 2 soldiers fighting that started the conflict. Well, there's a whole lot of border conflicts that are going to go on between the Japanese and the Chinese, and it's basically trying to frame this as a vicious attack by the Chinese is what started them on the trip to trying to defeat the Chinese. On top of that, they talk about how basically the taking of this capital wasn't a big deal because they eventually just moved the capital to a remote city, right? They didn't just give up. They're trying to hold on, so this is just a land conquest. Well, when you frame it like that, you change the dynamic of this event. It wasn't just an atrocity where they're burning buildings and leaving mass graveyards, right? We're just taking the old capital and they're moving the goalposts, right? It's softening the language and softening the way that this event is perceived. Now, if we look at the Chinese textbook, the Nanjing massacre, the Japanese military captured Nanjing. The Japanese military committed bloody atrocities against the residents of Nanjing and prisoners of war. So specifically, they're telling you that prisoners of war or innocent people are being attacked, killing them in extremely cruel methods like mass execution, burning, burying alive, beheading, biting by dogs. Nanjing massacre was the most horrible event in history according to the statistics. The estimates of the death caused by the Japanese atrocities against unarmed Nanjing amounts to more than 300,000 just during the 6 weeks of occupation. Between 20 and 80,000 Chinese women were raped, and many soldiers did things worse than rape. They disemboweled women, nailed them alive to walls. One of the acts penetrated by the Japanese aggressors on the Chinese people. They were so brutal that even their Nazi allies in the city were shocked, right? These are the two comparisons. You have people that lived it out, the government that was most affected by this, and then the aggressor, right? History is written by the winner. And in this case, you're taking 2 different histories, one by the aggressor and one by the oppressed, essentially, right? Now, the problem with the Japanese textbook is that you have a history of atrocities against other Asian people. You have a group of people named the Comfort Women, which were basically Koreans that were relocated, Korean women that were relocated all around Japanese territory in mainland Japan, in China, in the other territories that they're going to expand to later, like some of the islands. And they were specifically taken there as sex slaves. They're called Comfort Women. They were doped up on opium so that they couldn't resist. And again, you have these acts kind of coinciding with some of the military actions that's taken on in China. So you have a long documented history of sexual abuse and violence at the hand of the Japanese military, and an oppressed group with actual firsthand accounts of some of these atrocities happening. And firsthand accounts versus a very doctored version of history coming from Japan that's trying to give the people a pro-Japan point of view, some kind of perspective. It really does speak for itself.